with these videos, we're aiming to create an online library where if you don't manage to come to Full Circle or any of our events that we think are worth putting up, you can come in your own time and look at this video and learn about the topic.
Now, obviously, speciality Robusta or fine Robusta has been around for a little while now. It's been bubbling under for a little bit. It keeps popping up. It's not going away, and I think that's the reality that it is here. It is growing. It is here to stay. Pretty much as the quality and taste and attention to detail and all the attributes of speciality Arabica are being applied to speciality Robusta too, and really opening that door wide. So one of the key players in that sort of world in terms of the coffee that's been growing, the coffee that's being produced, the level of the R-graded coffee that comes out, which is the Robusta equivalency to Q. These are really bubbling up, and these one of the key people behind it, as I say, is Nishant Gurjer from Sethuraman Estate and Kaapiroyale in India. So I'm super happy to introduce a talk to us today. For those of you that were here last year, he did a brilliant talk on the history, like how Sethuraman came around. So if you have not seen that, not now, but afterwards, I would definitely recommend at some point going back to our YouTube channel or looking through on our website on the, I think it'll probably be under the news and events or news and views. We've got that video still. We record these so you can go back and do that. It's a really fascinating story, really interesting story. But here to take it to that next step and to discuss a little bit more about Robusta, I would like to introduce you to Nishant himself. Nishant, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Namaste to everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this. I hope all the audience who's here is safe in these really crazy times, and great to be back in Full Circle. So I'm extremely thrilled and happy to be part of this particular journey, and hopefully we go to the next step. Like Jamie mentioned, we did a nice talk last year. The entire talk was about how Sethuraman came into being and how I started looking after Robusta on my farm. But just to tell everyone, or just to give a small brief introduction, so I mean, some of the audience who may not have seen that or who may be new, I'm a 6th generation coffee grower. I've been actively looking after Sethuraman Estates and Kaapiroyale for the last 25 years. September 1995 was the year that I joined, or the month that I joined Sethuraman Estate. And the journey starts from there. We used to grow both Arabicas and Robustas. It's a family property. It's been in our farm, in our family for more than 200 years. And I decided to do something different, as in Robusta was still not considered cool. We didn't have the new age roasters who were looking at outside of the box. Arabica was considered quality, Robusta was considered a poor man's drink, and so on and so forth. But I had done my MBA from college, a master's in business administration, and I did a SWOT analysis of my farm. Realized that we can grow some exceptional Robustas because the soil here is conducive to grow very good quality Robusta. And I moved forward from there. And 25 years later, here we are, growing some exceptionally good Robustas. We are proud, like what Jamie mentioned, the very first R certified coffee in the world came out from my farm. We continue to send our coffees to be certified by the CQI and the R protocols. 15 coffees so far have been certified by them, which is the most by any person. I think in total, there are less than about 20 or 25 coffees ever certified, and 15 of them are from my farm. So this is just a small background, but I'll be happy to go into more details as a Q&A between Jamie and me, and also the audience. I can go deeper into any subject regarding quality Robusta, speciality Robusta, and what makes the new age Robusta so endearing to a lot of people who have left the so-called quality Arabica and are looking outside the box for good coffee. I won't say Robusta, just good coffee. I think that's important. I think all of us want to enjoy a good cup of coffee. We don't have to be stigmatized by whether it's Arabica or Robusta.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, it's a brilliant point. People that are looking for good quality coffee, not necessarily to fit within their box. I mean, I think one thing that, I've been in coffee you know, a little bit less time than you, but still sort of over 20 years. And it's, you really see that the flavors that people are interested in. And I think Robusta really does open up a different world of flavors. You know, these are the flavors that we're maybe less used to. You know, they're not always the sort of super citric or super malic, but, you know, I find myself much more these days tasting a lot of spices and trying to work out, okay, which spices am I picking up here and which spices am I picking up there? And it's really interesting how they work in Robusta. Maybe then let's start off, and yeah, I'll just reiterate to everybody, you know, if you've got questions, just feel free to pop them into the chat. There is, you know, we're completely open. We'll cover as much as we can. But I think one of the things that's really interesting me at the moment about Robusta is that word itself, Robusta, that really we're talking about Canephora, not Robusta. And Robusta is a varietal. It was, I believe, originally noted in Java, you know, when after the sort of rust outbreak of Ceylon had started traveling around and causing the damage. And Nishant, maybe there's something you can talk about, because you have a few different varietals on your farm. You know, we're very used to saying, oh, well, Bourbons are very well structured, or, you know, Geisha is the crazy fruity one, or, you know, Hybrido de Timor is the crossbreed. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the differences in the varietals and what varietals you actually grow on your farm.
So primarily, we have three varietals. One is called Old Robusta Peridenia. One is called Selection 274, and then we have the hybrid, which is called Cintuar or Congenesis into Robusta. So I'll start with Old Robusta. So like what you just mentioned, Robusta, the Robusta plants are grown in the wild or are found in the wild in, I think, Western Africa, Uganda, Angola, few other countries there, Congo. Some of them are found there. And I think during the leaf rust outbreak, what happened, I think, towards the end of the 1850s, 1860s, going into the 1900s, I think a lot of people started looking at Robusta as saying that because plantations or farms were getting devastated, Arabica farms. I think the Dutch brought in some of it to Java. And I think from there it came into what was called as Ceylon earlier, but now is Sri Lanka. Peridenia is actually Old Robusta on the farm is also called Peridenia. Peridenia is actually a research station which is based in Sri Lanka, or in Ceylon days it used to be called Ceylon during the colonial world, but now it's called Sri Lanka. So from Peridenia we got some. I mean, India got some of these Robusta plants, and we have some of those which are you can call them as heirloom coffee if you want to use the term rather than Old Robusta, probably much more marketing cool word of heirloom coffee. But yeah, we do have some of those with us. They're huge bushes. I mean, they're not, I wouldn't call them plants. They're actually more like trees because they can grow to be massive. Very, very hardy plants. They're more drought tolerant than some of the newer varieties of Robusta, although Robusta by default is not a varietal which is tolerant to drought. So that's one of the primary problems that we have with Robusta, not just in India, but I'm sure in different parts of the world. The water consumption is high if you want to grow not just quality, but also the quantity part of it. So they, you know, in Vietnam and Brazil, they grow using copious amounts of water, but here we are more careful. I will talk about how we are able to do that using different techniques, but that I'll come at a later date. But what I was just trying to get at was the Old Robusta or the heirloom coffee or Peridenia is definitely something that started the Robusta plantation or the Robusta in India. Then the coffee board did a little research, and then they came out with a more, of course, coming to the quality aspects, it's a small bean, something like the Yemen mocha. I mean, if you look at the difference between, let's say, the Cintuar, which is the boldest bean, and if you look at the Peridenia Old Coffee, which is the smallest bean, but extremely flavorful, a little bit more harsh, because, I mean, harsh is the wrong term, but a little bit more, I would say, more punchy in nature, only simply because I think the caffeine content is slightly higher in the Old Robustas, but highly tolerant to pests and diseases, as well as very tolerant to drought compared to the others. The hybrid of that was Selection 274, which is predominantly what you would find in my farm. Maybe about 60% of coffee that you find in my farm is Selection 274. Again, It's an improvement on the Peridenia, much more in terms of the quality as well as in terms of the yielding patterns. The other issue with Peridenia is it's kind of like an alternate bearer. So it's not a very regular bearer, but the year that it gives a big crop, I mean, it's a massive crop, then the next year tends to go into a bit of an off season. Selection 274 obviously improves upon that. And quality wise, probably the finest that we have is the Seal 2R, which is a hybrid. It's congenesis into Robusta. It's not actually a Robusta. Technically, it's a hybrid because congenesis by itself is a different varietal in the coffee family. And so is Robusta. It's a smaller bush, more droopy, very good yielder, bolder beans. And in terms of requirement, obviously, because it's a more consistent yielder and also yields more fruit per plant. I think the requirement of both water and nutrition is much higher in the Seal 2R. You do find in the cup, you do find Seal 2R as a mild acidity, which is rare for a Robusta. So that we have noticed, if you processed very well, so you don't lose the intrinsic quality of the coffee in the processing, you do get a mild acidity, which otherwise is difficult to find because Robusta is known more for the mouthfeel and the punchier nature, you know, the mocha, the chocolate flavors, hazelnut, etc. And like you said, some of the spices. But with the Seal 2R, you do find a bit of acidity coming through. So these are the three main varietals we have. We also have one more which doesn't belong to the Robusta family, which is called Vibraca. We do process a bit of Vibraca every year. Small quantities. We primarily have them on a few places on the farm. In the local language, it's also called tree coffee because it primarily grows like a tree. Very, very, I mean, the way I can describe it is it's probably the hardiest plant I've seen. I mean, you don't have to irrigate it, you don't have to give it nutrition, nothing. Every year it gives, but the fruit is not the best in terms of the quality unless it is extremely well harvested at the correct time and processed well. What I've seen is what has helped me in my processing definitely is the bricks meter. I think we look at the sugar content which is there before we harvest. In the old days, they used to just go by the color. So if you saw a berry looking red, it was assumed that it is good to go in terms of harvesting. Now we look at the sugar content because sometimes the color could be red because of various things or crimson red or whatever it is. And also depends on the processing. Now, if I'm doing a honey processed or a pulp natural coffee, I need a different bricks level. If I'm doing a washed, I need a different bricks level. And if I'm doing a natural, 100% natural, I need a different bricks level. So I think these are the kind of modifications that we have done to improve the intrinsic quality of the coffee. And that's how, you know, we've been able to ensure that some of the coffees that we produce are some of the finest in the world.
And I think that's, I mean, that's quite an interesting point there where you sort of move into the processing side of it, because one of the things that struck me as I was sort of looking more into Robusta and how I brought things around was actually a little bit about the quantity of flesh or the proportion of mucilage to bean is quite different from what I understand to Arabica. So I mean, in a way, you know, when you've got more sugar and you've got that fermentation going on, it's almost you need more control in order to process it well because you've got more sugar, so you've got more ability to sort of veer off, I guess. So I mean, I think I'm right in saying, like, you know, the fact that you sort of pay attention to this and we get that consistency must be quite interesting. But do you have any examples or do you have any stories about how the processing is different to Arabica? Does it take longer to ferment? Is it, you know, harder to wash or anything else like that?
Absolutely. I mean, both of them are totally different animals, so as to say, in terms of how you process and harvest them. Although I think the broader framework of doing it is the same. You need to harvest good quality cherries. You need to ensure that the cherries are clean when they're harvested. They're not contaminated with soil. You ensure that the cherries are harvested, at least in our case. We don't, I've seen a lot of photographs on the net of people using plastic bags in which they put the cherries. We use only food grade ijra or jute bags. The reason is the cherries have to breathe. See, because of the sugar content and also the fact that it is rich in iron, the mucilage, especially in Robustas. The fermentation process starts the minute you detach it from the plant. And the faster you can get it from the field to your processing area, the better it is for you. And the other thing, what happens is we harvest it in, let's say, from December to January or February, which is the driest period, as well as, let's say, the sun is at its brightest in terms of the temperatures, because we do have temperatures during the day reaching as high as 34, 35 degrees centigrade. So fermentation starts off right from the time that you harvest the coffee. And we have to ensure that, the fermentation doesn't happen in the bag, because these are the small things which ensure that, our quality is paramount versus others. Because I've seen a lot of places people use plastic bags, the coffee is sweating inside. I mean, the term is called sweating, but it's actually undergoing fermentation, because you're kind of making like an airtight scenario there, unless of course the modern, now you're seeing anaerobic kind of fermentation, which is a totally different level, but I don't think anyone was trying to do that. What I've also noticed is when it comes in, we do like test plots for each area. We don't kind of have like a one standard thumb rule as to whether it's going to ferment for 24 hours or 30 hours or 22 hours or whatever it is. Because I think what happens is it depends on the ambient temperature, it depends on the night temperature, it depends on the quality of the fruit that is coming. It depends on also what I want to achieve. Now, if I want a coffee to have like, a very clean, smooth kind of a thing without too much of a fermented taste, because some buyers want just a standard, no frills kind of a Robusta, but which is good in the cup, then you need to process it a little different. Whereas suppose there is a buyer of mine who says, he wants one of those coffees on the edge, which has a little bit of a fermented flavor, which has the cherry, and then you have the mucilage. It's not a pulp natural coffee, but at the same time, you want something which is a little unique. Then you play around with the fermentation time. So I think it's a very exciting scenario that we're into, and because of the fact that I have data which with me of the various fields that we have and how we have processed these various fields, and we record temperatures not just of the ambient temperature, but we also record the temperature of the coffee which is undergoing fermentation. The other thing is we allow the coffee to only ferment in its own mucilage. So we don't use any starter medium like what I've heard in other places, nor do we allow it with water. We drain out the water as much as possible after it goes through the wet mill. And then we have two people who are constantly raking the whole process. So it's I would say the broader perspectives would be the same, but then you kind of fine tune it based on what you're trying to achieve.
I mean, I think there's a really interesting point there that I don't know if anyone else picked up on this, but you just mentioned, like, it depends on what you want. And I think that's really nice, because I think sometimes you see in Arabica now, it depends on what the trendiest barista in the cafe's decided is the new trend or something like that. And I guess there's a lot more pressure in Arabica to produce what other people are asking for, regardless of whether that's right for the farm or the impact it has, or where it's going. So I think it's quite interesting with Robusta that perhaps that, with Sethuraman and almost going back to the original SWOT analysis you did and the creation of Sethuraman, this is your creative input that you're able to bring out and actually show. So yes, it is the coffee, but yes, there's a part of you that's in there that's bringing that quality and really changing things there, which I think is
absolutely. Yeah. And I also think that what happens is this is the creative edge that happens. The more you get involved in things like this, the processing. Although towards the end, I mean, at the initial stages, they're all like, you do A, B, and C, and you get the result. But I think towards the end, then, your natural instinct kind of takes over. You kind of realize that if I do this, I'm going to get this sort of a cup profile and so on and so forth. And then it's like almost like a master chef doing a creation, if you know where I'm coming from. So it's just brilliant spending so much of time on the farm, and especially during, the processing, it's like really, you spend a lot of time with the coffee. It's almost like your baby there, because you go every few hours, check the temperatures, you have all these sensors, and, you have all these, I mean, nowadays you have all these gizmos which tell you on your phone what the temperature is and so on and so forth. In the old days, it was all done by hand, but I mean, it's all the same thing. It finally takes you to the same path.
Nowadays, we all just do it staring at the screen, a bit like today.
I think even roasting, I mean, in the old days, you had roasters who would do that. Now they just look at a screen and say, it's good to go kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's I mean, this is fascinating, but let's dig into a couple of the questions. And guys, please keep these coming. These are great. So, first up, we've got a question from Deanna, who works for us here. How are the different varieties propagated on your farm? When you, I mean, like the sort of, what's the renovation process, I guess? Are you growing new ones from seed? Are they cuttings? Like, how does that process work?
So we every year we have a massive nursery. We have a schedule in the farm where we try and replant about 5% of our farm every year, so that once in 20 years we have a new farm. Everything in Robusta, everything is by seed. Although you do have cuttings, we have tried cuttings. We do have some super plants which we have identified over the years. These super plants are based on various parameters that not just me. I mean, I play a very small role in that, but I have my estate, my co-workers who have been on the farm much longer than I have. They know probably every square inch of the farm far better than I do, and they kind of point out and say that, you know, during this particular event, when we had excess of rain, this group of plants really stood out. We didn't have any fruit drop, we didn't have anything. The plants were green. Some of them turned yellow, but these bunch of plants turned green. So we then monitor and see that, you know, whether we want that attribute when we plant, saying that, okay, a few super plants are able to give me that attribute where they're able to ensure that they're able to take a very bad monsoon. Or the other opposite is, you know, you have a few plants which are absolutely green, like in the middle of a blazing summer, you know, at 34, 35 degrees in the sun. It's absolutely nothing as, you know, I mean, just to use a cricket analogy, it's like MS Dhoni, you know, in the middle trying to hit a six of the last ball to win the World Cup. So nothing is phased them, kind of thing. So, you know, so we just look at those and then we keep those plants, we monitor those plants, and we make sure that the seeds come from those plants. Yes, we have all the three varietals with us, and we try and keep those fields the way they are. We don't try and make old Robusta field a seal to our field, or we don't change it around, because I think all three of them play an important role. The other important role is, I mean, there's a happy space that all three of them are on, because as you may be aware, Robusta is all cross-pollinated. So the bees play an important role in the pollination. So there is some old Robusta genes which are going into my scene to or vice versa. So I think that happy space is what the plants are in. I don't want to disturb it and then become, you know, like the monocropping one varietal kind of a species.
Interesting. I mean, I like the fact that there's a potential there that maybe in the future we see selection Sethuraman or something like that. I mean, just a quick question on that. I mean, you talked just a little bit, or mentioned about the difference in leaf color in reflection to the conditions that it's growing in. But I mean, it's never really occurred to me before. But do you get, is Robusta just red cherries? Do you ever see any yellow cherries or different color variation?
We don't have yellow, but we have seen some which are more purplish. There are a few plants which they are almost purple in color. We have cupped them separately. I, in fact, have harvested them separately. I thought, you know, we were onto something. But quality-wise and also production-wise, they're poor. We have not removed them, but we have just let them be the way they are. Only from the point of view that I think, like I said, I think in nature, nothing happens by accident. Everything is there for a reason. And I don't want to play around with nature. We're just here to look after that. That's what we do on the farm. For everything, whether it's our shade trees, whether it's the way we look after the soil, etc. So I don't want to change anything, but we do have, I mean, it's a very small number. It's probably just a handful here and there, but they do have a role to play. We don't have any white ones. They're primarily, when they ripen, they all turn a nice, right from a crimson red to almost like a ruby red to a wine red kind of color. So they go through that different shades of red.
Interesting. And I mean, there's a couple of questions here from on Liberica, so let me sort of roll these ones here. I mean, we've got a question here from Dave Elray. Thanks for your question, Dave. Does Liberica exhibit any potential to be speciality? I mean, I guess there's.
I think any coffee, if processed well, see, the most important thing is, like, if you look after the plant well, I think a lot of times people treat the plant badly in terms of not giving it any nutrition, not giving it water, not giving it the necessary, let's say, the sprays, the foliar sprays. whatever it is, because the plant needs what it needs to grow. I mean, it's like having anything in your garden. If you look after your garden plants well, you have some of the finest flowers that you can ever see when you get up in the morning. But if you don't look after it well, you're going to have, yellow looking, very feeble looking plants. So I think it starts with the way you look after your plants. And then you need to see what best you can do in terms of how you can process it. So we have gone through a whole gamut of what we could try and do with Libericas. And at least for us, what we found was honey processed worked the best for Libericas. We did washed, we did a natural, we tried different processes, but somehow we always kept going back to the honey flavored coffee. It's like absolutely like explosions of sugar and brown sugar and those sort of things in your mouth when you put it in it. And of course, it's got that nice licorice kind of flavor. So it's like kalwa with intense flavor, like bursting in your mouth, blueberries and stuff like that. So it's great coffee if looked after well.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some here, and I think we've got some more coming in again. And it's like I say, it's a very interesting flavor. It's definitely not for all tastes. It's it's one of those that will make itself known. But I mean, it's got quite big markets as well.
And just to add, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but just to add, even the color of the coffee liquor is different. It's like typically most of us are used to a brownish, blackish kind of color, but this is more reddish. If you notice in the cup, it's more a tinge of red is there with the Libericas.
Interesting. And then this is a question here from Aaron. We'll just stick with the Liberica thing at the moment. I've just lost the question. Are your Liberica plants the large-leaved, large-fruited types, or smaller fruited types, sort of similar in size to the Arabica? And did they come to you via Sri Lanka?
So actually, funnily enough, we have both. We have the real bold ones, which are almost more like strawberry size, the really big ones, and we do have some which are even smaller, like you could say something like the Arabica size. So we do have both on our farm. Again, they were brought in the old days. Actually, the story goes that they were brought basically as fence, when you needed a fence material rather than planting any other tree or putting a pole as a fence. They started putting Liberica because it grows abundantly and it's very hardy. It's very difficult. I mean, to cut it down, probably you need one of those super chainsaws, not even an ordinary chainsaw will do. So it's a very hardy plant, and so I guess a lot of people started planting it. Then they realized that there's no value because no one wanted the coffee. So then they started chopping it down. So we have looked after our Libericas right from the beginning. So as we started moving up the value chain in terms of Robusta, we said there is potential. We do small lots. I mean, we don't grow crazy large quantities of Liberica. We do small lots, but we are happy with what we've been able to do.
Interesting. And then we've got a question here from Suhas. Thank you. What bricks content? We were talking about bricks content earlier and measuring the bricks rather than color. What bricks content do you recommend during harvest for natural, washed, and the honeys?
Just depends on, like I said, just depends on what variety you have. But typically, I would say anything above 24 is good for a washed. If you're looking at just a washed coffee, at least that's what we do. Anything above 24, I would go to about 26, 27 for a honey processed. And I know it's getting out there, but we almost hit 29, 30 for naturals. It's not easy because at that level, the sugar content is extremely high. You're playing a fine line. So I would suggest it's something like, for beginners or for people who have not gone that route, don't go up to 30 because it's really like you've let the cherry on the plant till it's almost getting to a stage where it could be fermenting on the bush, so as to say. But because we have been doing it for a while, but I would say if you're doing wash, say around 24 is a good number.
Okay. And then we've got a question here that I guess is related from AJ. With the cherry coffee, what's your opinion on shade drying? I guess so, direct sun versus more shade drying of the cherries. And have you ever tried
all our coffees are shade dried, as in we don't expose it to the sun directly. During the afternoons, we pull out shade nets. These are UV resistant shade nets, what you typically would use in a nursery. So we cover all our coffees with that from say roughly about 1 in the afternoon till about 4, where the UV rays are at its peak. I mean, the sun can come through. I think we are using now about 70% shade nets or 70% shade, as in the amount of shade that the berries or the fruit or the parchment would get on the patio. We cover it with that, and then we remove the covering after 4 o'clock. So we have noticed that between 1 and 4, the UV rays are at its peak. So we don't do 100% open drying. Ours are all, in that sense, shade dried coffee.
That's interesting. You mentioned UV there. I know there's a couple of people I've been speaking to recently about that factor of UV and yeah, sort of just like the color of the shade nets and the what quality of light wavelength is there. So that's really interesting. And I guess just flicking back into the second question from Aaron here on temperature, because obviously yeah, it's very hot out there. I think you said earlier it can get up to sort of 36 or something. But what is the annual temperature and the annual rainfall on your farm?
So the temperature during the dry months are typically December, January, and February for us. The peak, I mean, we've had events where it has crossed 36 degrees centigrade. This is, but typically we are between 34, 35 would be the highest that we have recorded. This would be for a short span of time. We do overhead irrigation for our farm on a regular basis to ensure that the plants are kept happy, because at 34, 35, if you leave them the way they are, Robusta tends to have a bit of condition where the leaves start wilting, etc. I mean, you don't have to do it every day, but the plants need some water to break the drought conditions. So the peak is around 34, 35 where we are based. In terms of annual rainfall, I don't have it in mm, but I have it in terms of inches, which and probably we can convert it. So here it's we are still with the old British system of using inches versus mm, which is the world has moved on to. So we do an average of about 80 inches a year, out of which about 50%, that is about 40 inches, comes during the monsoon. The monsoon is not yet started. It's due expected any time. We get about 40 inches in the months of say the middle of June going up to the middle of August. So about 60 days, it's crazy rain. And then of course, then it starts easing off. But this period of time, we get copious amounts of rain.
Interesting. And then actually, we've got another question from Aaron down here. And I'm loving these, Aaron. Thank you very much. Are there any cultivation differences between the Coffea congusta, so the Canephora and Congensis, and just C. Canephora as in Robusta?
The primary one, like I mentioned, I've seen that the Canephora or Congensis Robusta needs a lot more water. So when we do irrigation, what you can see the background is actually of a Congensis into a Robusta plant, which has just bloomed. This is this year, 2021, February flowering. The background, if you all can see, is of that. It flowers beautifully. It's probably the highest yielding blocks in our farm. It needs a lot more water, at least about 20 to 30% more water than my other Robustas. Needs a little bit more nutrition as well. But I mean, being a hybrid, I've noticed that if you don't give it the water and the nutrition, the plants don't yield as much. So it took us a little while to understand that, the plant needed more water. It just so happened, I mean, like a lot of things by accident, we had one of those years where we had a lot of rain, and especially the rain during the flowering season, and we had one of the best crops from Canephora, and then we realized that this plant needs a lot more water. So yeah, it needs more water and nutrition in a nutshell, yes.
And there's an interesting question here from Rizwan as well. How high up have you gone in terms of elevation for all three varietals, and how have the elevations changed the cup from an R grader's perspective?
So what we've noticed is, obviously, as you go higher, we have noticed that there's more acidity in the cup. There's a mild acidity, like I mentioned, especially in the Canephora. What we have also noticed is that the ripening is a lot slower as you go higher because of the angle of the sun's rays, obviously. And so what we have done is, so our farm starts at about 2,600 feet above sea level. which would be about 850 meters, going up to about 1,100 meters. So different areas have different taste profiles. It just so happens by default that some of our lower areas have some of the older Robustas. It's not done by design, it's just the way it was. And then as we've moved higher up, we get the selection 274, and then we have the Scene to R. I do have some Scene to R at lower elevations also. What we've noticed is in the cup, the acidity tends to fade off a little bit more in the lower elevations than the higher elevations. In the higher elevations, it's more pronounced than in the lower elevations. Leaving that aside, I think because we play around a lot with the fermentation times, etc. I mean, if I probably had to put all three of them on the same plane, then it would be different. But since we do cupping of different styles and different fermentation times and so on and so forth, so it's very difficult for me to say. We try and play around a little bit, but bottom line, what we have noticed is that the drying period, the ripening period is different, as well as the acidity in the cup is different.
Interesting. And then I guess sort of going into, or this leads on from that, a question from Chris. Is there a preferential processing method that suits Robusta best? I mean, I know with Liberica, you said you found honey worked better, but is there something that you find better with Robusta, or is there, particularly with the acidity, is CXR better as a washed and SLN 274 as a natural, or any sort of trends around that you've noticed?
I think what everyone has kind of liked is the washed Robusta, because it's kind of like an evergreen kind of a coffee. It can be used as a single origin. I know that a lot of people are using it as a single origin in cafes. I know that they're using it as a blend, like a house blend. I think it can be used anywhere. It's like one of those nice pick-me-up kind of coffees, because it gives you a beautiful mouthfeel. It has that nice chocolatey kind of flavor that all of us go back to, hazelnut chocolate with a mild hint of spices. Whereas sometimes with the naturals, it's a pure preferential thing, because sometimes, like I said, when we're going to Brix levels of 28, 29 and 30, it can be sometimes on the edge. So it can be extremely fruity in the cup, and everyone may not enjoy every single day to have a fruity kind of a cup. So what we have figured out is we do about maybe 70% of our coffees are all washed. Then we do have some naturals, and then of course the honey process, which we call as Mandarin. So we do have the Mandarin as well. But again, like I said, it's not like a fixed ratio saying that it has to be done. It purely on these are all pre confirmed orders from different buyers from different parts of the world. So we process it based on that. I mean, it's not like, we process it saying it has to be done. If for some reason 1 year we get a larger order of naturals, we do more naturals.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting that actually with naturals that in my experience, where I've tasted a lot more, I think coming from an Arabica perspective, you expect natural to be crazy fruity, you have in your head Ethiopia, I guess, maybe, or something that's big. And Robusta naturals are never that volume of fruitiness. There's a fruitiness there, but they're much more akin to a sort of a Brazil level of like, it's definitely something slightly different around there, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, it's just probably the nature of the beast. It's the way the plant is. So probably a good clean washed Robusta is probably the safest option in terms of Robustas. Although in the world, there are not too many people who do a good washed Robusta, because most of the coffees are naturally processed, and not only naturally processed, obviously go into the instant coffee kind of space. I'm talking about general Robustas, but yeah.
I mean, it is interesting, and I think a note on that we've certainly found here over the years as we've tasted it, and I think it's probably a useful practice for those people looking to get into specialty Robusta a little bit more, is to not taste on the same table as Arabica Robusta, because the difference then tends to be more what your brain and your palate focuses on. Whereas once actually you get a good table of Robustas, then you really start attuning to those differences a lot more between the processes of the varietals. I know just last week we had a table of your coffees on, and actually Aaron was here as well, where we were cupping them. But it's very interesting. We tasted Guatemala Robustas, Vietnam Robustas, the CXR, the washed, and it's really quite surprising how big that world can be. And you can just see that future of potential sort of lining up, which is
And the other thing, what I would suggest to anyone who's moving to Robusta or trying Robustas, don't think of it as Robusta. Just think of it as a nice coffee. I mean, I think the minute you say it's a Robusta, there's kind of like a stigma which comes into your mind saying that, oh, am I going to taste burnt rubber? Am I going to taste something else? You know, because that's the common flavor. I mean, the first thing I remember when I took my coffees and we attended a trade show and we asked people to actually just taste coffee. We didn't say whether it's Arabica or Robusta. They kind of like enjoyed it. And then slowly when I broke the news, it was almost as if I had committed sacrilege to them or committed some sort of major crime to them, because they almost wanted to spit out the coffee because they suddenly thought, oh, can Robusta be so good, you know? And then I need to throw this out because I'm a specialty grower. I mean, a specialty taster of Arabica, and now I'm tasting Robusta. So, you know, you do have all those sort of things. So the mindset has changed over the years. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's an interesting question. So, and I don't know whether you have the answer for this, but it's certainly one that struck me more and more recently is, you know, given that your coffees are R grade scored and things, do you think maybe there's a gap in that tasting wheel to explore those tastes that are available in Robusta? You know, we don't have, you know, we tend to have a generic taste note of spices. We're not necessarily looking at, I don't know, is it clove, is it nutmeg, is it mace? You know, do you think maybe there's room to expand upon that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure more and more people who get involved in the specialty Robusta space, people will look at, you know, distinguishing and saying that these are the taste profiles which are coming. I think what's happened so far is it's always been like the poor cousin of Arabicas, and then now slowly it's finding its way up. So people are saying, okay, I'm buying a good Robusta. I mean, as long as they're happy to say that I'm buying a good Robusta, they're not still got into the nuances of what a good Robusta could be, or what distinguishes one, or what they are looking for. So I think a lot of people are just happy that they've got a good Robusta now. I think it's just a matter of time, because I remember 25 years back when I got in, there was nothing but specialty Robusta. 10 years back also, I mean, the Robusta word had moved from being an absolutely abusive word in the specialty space in coffee to an acceptable word. Today, at least you're talking about specialty. I think when we have a similar full circle talk, maybe 5 years down the road, it will probably be that, you know, we'll be talking about all these nuances. You're talking about, you know, you're able to get this flavor and that flavor, and this is what it is. So I think it's going to evolve, but I'm glad Robusta finally is finding its feet in the specialty world market.
And there's an interesting question here from Azuz. Thanks, Azuz. Have you ever experimented with the new hybrid of Arabusta or a more rust disease resistant hybrid? And I guess maybe that's, you know, you're looking at the sort of, like the Arabustas as we know them, or is there a way of, you know, flipping it on its head, I guess?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Arabustas
like, well, you know, have you ever experimented on your farm with any crossings between Robusta and Arabica to improve the flavor of the Robustas?
I mean, like I said, probably the plant does its own crossing, because these are all cross-pollinated. Unlike Arabicas, I think Dr. Aaron Davis would probably be a better position to probably give a comment on that. I can see that he's posted a few comments, but they're all harvested by nature. Bees play a very important role, so do butterflies, and so do the other insects. So I think there is already some sort of mixing and matching going on in that. So I've not played that role of trying to hybridize myself. We have just, like I said, selected super plants, or what we consider super plants in our farm, because I think they have adjusted to the microclimatic conditions of my farm, and we try and propagate them. So we are happy with what we get. I mean, the quality is there, but no, I've not actually gone into that space of trying to do mixing and matching of that. I think I leave it to people like Dr. Aaron Davis to come out with most.
And actually, he's had a very interesting point. I don't know if you popped it through the way we were talking about Congensis earlier, and you were saying about how it liked much more water. That he actually points out that actually Congensis itself is from originally wet places in Africa, such as flooded forests and riverbanks. So interesting that.
So probably that's the reason why it needs a lot more water.
Interesting. And then actually, and one thing that we've really not touched upon, which perhaps is probably one of the most important questions around this from Thierry in our quality lab. Can higher Robusta prices be a hindrance or a positive impact in the coffee industry? I mean, really, this is at the end of the day, you're running a business, right? You need to make a living. There's lots of people growing Robusta out there. we've seen that big push with specialty Arabica about people wanting to pay more, people wanting to pay the correct amounts. Is, you know, how's this pricing game work? Because we're at what very beginning of specialty Robusta, so we've got that ability to maybe learn the lessons of pricing from Arabica and reform that for Robusta. I mean, I guess.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't think there's, like I said, if you think about it as good coffee, if you're willing to pay $30, $40 for a Colombian, I just saw the Cup of Excellence. I think they broke some records a few days back. So if you're willing to pay so much for that, there's no harm in paying. I won't say you don't have to pay that much. I mean, I'll be happy if someone's willing to pay me that sort of money for my coffee. Not going to complain. But nevertheless, what I was trying to get at was, if you look at it as good Robusta, and if you figure out what it's going to do for you, why are you getting into this? Is it you want to distinguish your blend from the others? Is it going to add more flavor to your blend? Is it ensuring, like we do know that some people are serving it as a single origin. I know that in a few places, they have different blends made of Robusta only because there's a particular audience it appeals to. I mean, as long as you know what you're using it for, whether it is you're buying it at commercial rates or whatever it is, the negotiation part is totally different. But I think that the time will come where I think specialty Robusta will definitely command a lot more than what it is commanding now. And the only reason being that I think people will get used to drinking good quality coffee. I mean, I'm not going to say Robusta, just good quality coffee. If you're willing to pay $30, $40 for a cup of Colombian in the Cup of Excellence or whatever it is, why not pay? I mean, as long as it's it gives you all the attributes that the buyer wants.
Yeah.
I mean, a similar thing with wine, right? I mean, no one thought, maybe 50 years back, it was all French wine, but now it's, you have wine from every single origin in the world. So similar with Robusta.
I think that's a good analogy, and I mean, it's exactly that. Is wood better than stone? I mean, it's well, what is better? Who prefers what? It's ultimately what we enjoy. And I mean, I know. I mean, one of the big things that I always sort of look at and really enjoy is in a previous role, I spent some time looking at behavioural drivers for why people consume coffee, and it's very interesting. Like, some people are doing it because they want that tea-like experience and that sit down and that sophisticated. Some people want the jolt. Some people want they want to be reminded of their nonna's coffee from, when they were a kid. So I think there's a whole world out there, and to say that, well, one style is right and the other style is wrong is
but the most important thing in that, Jamie, is to ensure that the coffee is good tasting, because nobody likes a poor tasting coffee. As long as the coffee is good tasting, then it's left up to the individual. I mean, if I'm going to charge $20 for a cup of coffee, I may just sell one bag of that. But the fact is, there's something very unique about it, and the person who's going to buy it may want that uniqueness. That's why he's buying that coffee at $20.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's just a whole world you can sort of dig into on that. But I mean, I think, and that's more and more now. I think I might have mentioned this before, but the other day I was at another of these online symposiums, and it was quite interesting where people were talking a little bit about specialty Robusta, and for the first time people were saying, oh, have you had this coffee from that farm, or what about this guy in this country, he's producing an interesting one, or she's got this one in this farm and that's really interesting. And for me it was quite interesting to note that that's the first time I've seen, rather than people defend specialty Robusta as a whole, it seemed to have jumped over into this person on that farm in this country. And like you say, it's that, is it a good coffee? Not, is it is it an acceptable replacement? Got another quick question coming in here and I think it's quite a nice little fun one from Sahadev. Is there a story behind your honey coffee called as Mandarin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we first cupped it, I mean, many years back on the farm, we did get hints of, the citrus flavors coming through. And also we do grow a little bit of citrus on the farm. So I don't know if that attributed a bit of that to the honey processed coffee, but we wanted to distinguish it because typically everyone just calls it as honey or black honey or yellow honey or, different names. So I think Mandarin was something, I mean, it was purely to do initially with the taste, and also it sounded nice, it had a nice ring to it, calling it Mandarin. So
yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful little story, but I mean, I do think there is a, you said it at the beginning of the talk, there is a level of marketing that, I mean, I think the most effective marketing that you have in these things is when it's actually backed up by a quality product, and that's absolutely the case here. But let's be realistic. I mean, we only discover these things because it's had an attractive name that's caught our eye, or a nice picture, or there's been somebody talking about it. So yeah, I mean, it's that nice balance, isn't it? And it's I mean, it is a delicious coffee. It's I mean, I will say, for those of you that are there, these are all coffees that we have. These are all coffees that we stock. If the world was in a slightly different times, we would absolutely be going out and tasting these with you guys when the world opens up. We're more than happy to bring these coffees and sort of taste them, because I think that ultimately is one of the big things, isn't it? It's just like, look, actually put this in your mouth, actually experience it, actually understand it, and then you can really see the difference and see that potential and get excited about it in the same way that we get excited about any other good coffee. So just looping back then, another question here. We've talked a couple of times about the super plants, but also, yeah, I guess we talk about it in coffee, and we've talked about it with World Coffee Research and people like that when they've been developing new things. How long does it take, or how many generations do you find it takes from the super plants before you get sort of consistency and stability in that crop?
So what we have noticed is, because this is all from the seed, so what we have done is, over a period of time, we have looked at various angles to what we would call a super plant. Like I said, whether it's drought tolerant, whether it is consistent yielder, whether it's good in the cup, which is very important for us because we are all dealing with specialty Robusta. So all these various attributes, and also the shape of the bush. See, I don't want a crazy bush going all over the place because it's very difficult to manage it going forward. So you do have some of the bushes which grow, vertical, because all their branches tend to grow vertical. So we do have some of those also on the farm, whereas we like to have more of a manageable kind of a shape, which is more drooping and falls down, so it's easy to harvest. So we look at all these attributes, and it's I think it's been done over, I won't say generations, but it's at least been done over many years. So we don't directly put something out just because we feel that this is what it is. So we have a small test plot kind of a thing. I have about 1/4 of an acre where we put all these plants out initially. We just see how it grows. Sometimes, what looks good, the seed may not perform as well in the nursery or in the test plot. So we just try and ensure that we are happy with that area. And then once we start finding that, yes, it's ticked a few boxes that we want them to tick, that's when we start then looking at how we can take it forward.
Yeah, interesting. And then again, another question that actually I saw earlier that is always an interesting one I find when I go visit these farms to discuss the process there that we didn't cover earlier. But from Julian, what pruning stumping system do you have in place on the farm? Are you every sort of 10 years, I guess? Are you every 15 years? Do you cut right?
You mean replacement program? Is that what the question was?
Yeah, I guess, what's your...
Every year we kind of replant about 5% of the area. So in 20 years, we'll have a completely new farm kind of thing.
But
so
do you like take up the old trees, or do you stump down to the bottom so that they regrow afresh? Or?
So it just depends. I mean, sometimes what happens is there are certain areas where we will probably need to do a clean removal because it demands that. Sometimes we can probably get away with just partly doing what you just mentioned, stumping it down and leaving suckers, and then probably doing infillings. So it just depends. I mean, it just depends on how that particular block is looking. Sometimes it's just easier for us to just remove all the old Robusta plants and then replant them with seeds from the super plants that we have been talking about. But like I said, there's no one particular style in which we do it, but we try and ensure that everything is taken care of, so that when I go back to that block, it's going to serve me well for the next 20 odd years.
Interesting. Yeah, exactly. And then okay, so let's I think this is going to be a great question for you, Nishant, from our very own Phil, because we're coming to the end of our time now. If Coley was a coffee, which one would he be?
Probably he'll be a natural.
Any particular varietal or?
Probably he'll probably be the old Robusta because he's more punchier than the others.
It's brilliant. Yeah, Phil is very into his cricket. It's
yeah, I mean,
as
all of us. So we're looking forward to the World Test Championship, which is going to just happen a week from now. So let's hope that India can bring it home.
Exactly. Well, yeah.
Yeah, you guys are not there, so you have to.
Oh, we're safe then. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not up to date on cricket. I have to confess. Okay, well, look, we're coming up to the next talk. I mean, definitely, it is Dr. Aaron Davies who will be doing this talk, so that's brilliant. I mean, he's had some great questions on here, and I think it's really interesting. Oh no, sorry, my bad. It is Henry who's doing the next talk. People are frantically waving at me, telling me I got it wrong. Guys, thanks so much for asking the questions. Any questions? I will scan through. If there's any questions that we haven't picked up, we will ask if we will try and get back to you for that. That's great. For those of you that are in the UK or are able to travel to the UK later in the year, we are going to potentially be looking at, we will be at Cafe Culture later in the year. So we're going to look to see if there's something we can do there around that side of stuff. So that's there. Nishant, I have to say, I mean, I'm a big fan of all the work that you've done there and a lot of the coffees you've got there. Thank you also for having the best background of the talk so far. Absolutely love it. I look forward to bringing a lot of the people over to visit you when we can travel again. But yeah, I think for your time, for your coffee, for your expertise, can I just say thank you very much.
Absolutely brilliant spending this time with all of you all. Obviously, there have been a lot of questions. If any of you all want to directly ping me, I'm sure you can get my contact details from Jamie. And if there's something very specific you need to know about me, my coffee, my farm, I'll be happy to answer it the best I can. And once again, brilliant to be on Full Circle. Wish you guys all the success, DR Wakefield and team. You are doing a super job. Thank you once again for having me and my coffee. Namaste. Good luck to everyone. Stay safe.
Namaste. Thank you, Nishant.